I was just thinking about how people have their tradition about how they understand certain things, right? And people group together over different things they agree on, whether it be something they agree about. And then people will give sort of caveats and things they're willing to have disagreement on. But as long as you're with me on this, right? And they'll rally together against something like a cult or a heresy, right? And it's like, sucks, man, how that works. Because then like personalities come into it and sort of self, and like, if you used to be an Adventist, you're just you're hopelessly gonna not be careful about your criticisms just to undermine it because you want to see it come down. And I'm gonna, if that's your attitude, like I don't appreciate that. So I'm gonna point that out when you do that. Because I think the Adventist movement is a work of God. So, and I'm more convinced the more I interact with people that that's the case. But I was just thinking about Satan, and like I'm just noticing my motivation to want to defend the idea that there's a single Satan, right? I like what Dr. Heiser says about it, but he seems to. I actually have concluded sort of the opposite of him while recognizing the same distinctions as him. Like it's often said, well, the definite article issue, right? And I do agree that Satan is a word. It's a description. For instance, one of the most striking examples is in Numbers. I think I should pull that up. Numbers 22, I think. Literally, the angel of the Lord in the Hebrew is Satan. And that freaks out a lot of people, right? Because they don't really understand how translation works at all. Not that I'm an expert, but it's like the angel of the Lord is called Satan because the word in its use there is just opposer or sort of the enemy, the opposition. But everybody kind of knows Satan. That why is that striking there in that usage there? Well, because to varying degrees, different people are like, well, Satan in the New Testament is the one opposing God, right? And so what's going on here? How is the angel of the Lord Satan? I've seen Satanists, even people that are anti-Christian, want to sort of rally this sort of ignorance against Christians, right? Because with the whole Morning Star and the King James only stuff, right? They changed it. They're Satanist Bible translators, and it's like, no, it's not that conspiratorial. Sorry to disappoint you. It's like, it's the way terms which have meaning come down to us. It's like, day star, morning star. Like we have these distinct, is Lucifer? Oh, guess what? Lucifer isn't his real name. Obviously, it's like, right. It's not his real name. It's just a Latin translation of, a light bearer. Angels are considered like bringers of the light. They're like the things in the sky in the heavens that you see move, maybe, right? Or not. They're fixed in the heavens. And the Bible uses that. We say it's a metaphor. Other people say, no, they were just retarded and thought they were actually the angels. And right. And it's like, how should we think of that? It's just like, what is a spirit? Well, if you're a believer and you're sensitive, you might be like, well, they knew that spirits were, there was just a metaphor they were using. It's like, well, in the Old Testament, if a person had died, that they stopped breathing, and the breath of God made Adam alive by giving them the breath of life, and a dead body doesn't breathe. A living body, breathes in and out. Jesus uses that metaphor about the Spirit of God. It's like, it is the wind. It's like, were they just primitive and they're making stuff up? Spirit makes things move. It's like the wind. You don't see it. And when someone's alive, they breathe. And when they die, they stop breathing. In the flood narrative, everything that had the breath of the life of God in its nostrils. Some translations say spirit. Some translations say breath, because it's the same word, right? therefore spirits aren't real. Therefore, Satan, the word Satan means just kind of opposer. So there isn't a being called Satan. It's like, no, it's more complicated than that. Keeps it interesting, doesn't it? So obviously the New Testament writers refer to a particular being, which has relationship to sort of the language of this. It wasn't wrong in the history of Christianity to point out how the New Testament writers use this idea of Satan. They point to the ones opposing God in history, like the dragon imagery, which goes way back into the ancient Near East, but it's also utilized in the Bible. There's Leviathan, and there's the dragon in the prophecies of Daniel, which is describing the kingdoms which are mentioned in the prophecy and then mentioned in scripture and then used in the New Testament in the book of Revelation regarding the sort of meta narrative about God's plan of salvation and how it would happen and when his Messiah would come and that he's coming back and that there will be opposition and there will be a counterfeit and that opposes God. Jesus called Peter. He just said, "Get behind me, Satan." He saw Satan fall like lightning, right? Where should we place that event? How should we understand that quote of Jesus? Is it from the book of Enoch? Does that make Enoch canon? I would say no, but it's a nuanced thing. And some people, because of the way they interpret the Bible and their hermeneutical sort of commitments, or maybe their subconscious commitments to want to undermine, say, something they used to believe when they were less mature as Christians, that may or may not be a legitimate something to discard. But be careful discarding ideas about that have some sort of historical weight. There is a being called Satan. And yes, the angel of the Lord, to Balaam in Numbers 22, who is a false prophet that's against God, at least at certain points, right? It's a false prophet sort of thing. And so the angel of the Lord was resisting that. So he was a Satan to the one cursing God's people or whatever, right? What does that mean though? Does the Satan in Job? So Heiser would say that means it's not like that being called Satan. And I actually kind of think it's the other way around. It's like on one level, Satan means opposition or the accuser, right? That's why people say he's like in Job, he's like God's lawyer. And that's true in a sense, but not at the expense of there being that being who is this one called Satan. If you believe the New Testament witness is revealing the truth about that. So my suggestion is something like recognize how the word is used or you're just in denial. Recognize how it's presented literarily in the different books and the different traditions because they have a context and a time of being written. But if you believe the New Testament, which is the witness about Jesus being the Messiah, which is the faith and the hope, we have to take that testimony that they were inspired and that makes sense because they're the witnesses to what's being revealed in the Messiah. And they say there is this being and he's attached to these opposition to God in the text, like in Daniel, which goes along with their sort of hermeneutical principle about there's like this meta narrative, this spiritual battle going on behind the scenes. It's weaved into the book of Daniel. It's weaved into the book of Revelation. Michael against Satan. I think Michael's Jesus. Now, and Jesus is the eternal Son. That makes a lot of sense. It shows God is sovereign. Jesus was pre-incarnate, the Prince of the Covenant, and then he comes to his people in the first century and he establishes the promised new covenant for them, which is the way to call back the nations, the Great Commission. God's been there the whole time. He put the plan into order, and according to Genesis, and this ties the whole thing together. But some people don't like that because they don't want to see, for other reasons, the sort of that congruency or whatever in the story. Because maybe they don't like the fact that the sacrificial system is tied so closely to that, because they don't like Calvinism and they don't like penal substitution, which I'm not arguing for or against here. I don't think he should become a Calvinist. I'm studying atonement theories or whatever, but be careful you don't discard something because you associate it with something else, and then you go and your mission is to undermine this or that, and then so you're willing to not look into certain things because you see such a heavy attachment to something you say, quote, fighting against. Just, I think we got to be really careful about that, in my opinion. And I'm sensitive to that because there's people I agree with about different things all over the place, and I want to be faithful. I would just say it's really easy to do that. Like, so who is Satan? Well, I would say literally, he certainly is always that which is in opposition, almost exclusively to God. So does that mean, if you took that definition, would that mean, well, then there's not like this one being that fell in the primordial sort of creative before creation? Well, if the New Testament identifies as the snake as this fallen being, did he fall? It seems to be presented already fallen as he presents himself as the snake. Well, that means it happened before creation, right? Or it doesn't say, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to say otherwise. The New Testament is referring back to the garden, that being that opposes God. So how should we put that together? Well, there seems to be individuals, according to the book of Daniel, who's the prince of Persia, right? There's who's the prince of Tyre, who's the spirit behind the prince of Tyre? Is that a different, right? Or was the man possessed of demons? Did he have one demon, or was there many, or did they even know? Well, I'm Legion. I am that which opposes God and his plan. Is there a leader? I don't know. Seems like it. But is what really actually ends up mattering is that there seems to be that which opposes God throughout the whole narrative, from the very beginning in the garden and through to the end, and God's promised a judgment of that person, Satan and his angels, opposition and the messengers of that opposition. Why say it that way? Well, because that's what those words mean. Well, are you denying that there's actual individual angels and there's one single leader named Satan? No, I think there is. Those things are true also. But literally, it's like there is messengers of the message that opposes God, and there's that thing that you can call opposition to God, which is Satan. Is it the Satan? Is it Satan capital S? Is it Satan as a descriptor, as an adjective or whatever? Which is it? And let me be that cool smart guy that says, which one is it? Yes.